Hello everyone. I hope you all are doing well today. And today we are going to discuss a very interesting theory which will be helpful for you when it comes to managing oneself, managing your own self. But before we start today's topic, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Today we are going to discuss a very interesting theory which is called the Black Swan Theory. Many of you must have also seen the famous Hollywood movie, The Black Swan. Sometimes we don't get complete information in life. There's always something we can't see or hear that might be driving events around us. Sometimes we rely on the stories of other people who might have a hidden agenda or explaining events the way they do. And we also have our own inherent biases and beliefs that may color what we see to the point where our judgment becomes inaccurate or faulty. For instance, using binoculars comes in handy. They provide focus and clarity to what would otherwise remain a blurry blob of colors. And yet, binoculars completely blinds us to what is actually physically close to us and within our reach. It is important to understand on when to zoom in or zoom out in life when it is about managing our own self, managing oneself. So let's understand the perspective, especially of zooming out, when to zoom out in order to manage oneself well with a Black Swan theory. Let's get started.
This theory of ignoring black swans is helpful to understand how outliers shouldn't actually change your thinking. Until nearly the 18th century, people in the Western world, which at the time basically referred to as Europe, believed that all swans were white. Their reasoning was simple. They had never seen anything besides white swans. In the absence of swans of any other shade or color, they had no reason to believe they existed. It never even crossed their minds. But in 1697, Dutch explorer William de Vlaming traveled to Australia, a site that Europeans didn't start visiting until 1606. It was still a relatively new frontier for them. While exploring what's now known as the Swan River near the present-day city of Perth in Western Australia, de Vlaming and his crew saw what no European had ever seen before. Black swans, lots of them. News of their discovery had a strong impact, rewriting quite a few tenets of their belief systems about zoology that were based on the principle that all swans were white. Goodbye, centuries of supposed knowledge. Hello, indisputable evidence of being incorrect. What if swans could be all colors of the rainbow? What does this mean for humans? What are the far-reaching implications of discovering a black swan? Statistician Nassim Nicholas Taleb adapted this bit of history to form the Black Swan Theory. Taleb uses the black swan as a metaphor to describe unpredictable events that create a massive change in perception, perspective, and understanding. And yet, in his definition, a black swan event is something that should not change perception or accepted knowledge because it is such an anomalous outlier. It may simply create an awareness of possibilities, but most black swan events don't deserve to be accounted for in everyday life. Maybe it just means that swans come in white and black, and belief systems on zoology don't need to be thrown out the window. As a brief example, the knowledge that the lightning bolt struck a tree nearby can be frightening, and it might encourage you to equip some houses with grounding rods. But should such a one-time event influence the way you live your life? Staying indoors whenever it starts to rain, carrying a metal shield around with you at all times, or moving to a part of the world that has little to no rain like the desert? Does it mean we should all move underground to live as a mole people? No, this event shouldn't have such a big influence. On a global scale, events like the fall of the Berlin Wall, assassination of a public figure, and the tragedy of 9/11 could be considered black swan events. On a more personal level, they could include a factory suddenly closing, a local company being out by a major conglomerate, parents divorcing, a house being burgled, anything that disrupts and upends our placement or personal views. There is an impact to be sure, but how much should we truly account for these outliers? As unnerving, drastic, and cataclysmic as black swan events might be, their overall importance to one's belief system or worldview can be overestimated. Human nature being what it is, one might even try to qualify a black swan event and excuse it in retrospect. Well, when you really think about it, all the signs were there and we should have seen it coming. We think the same way while in a relationship breakup as well, right? Such a viewpoint tends to rewrite our understanding and belief system. And that's a problem because no matter how devastating or overwhelming a black swan event might be, it's still an irregularity or aberration. Black swan events are not the norm. Many of them don't happen more than once or twice in a lifetime. But their shocking, sometimes catastrophic natures can make one alter, distort, or overturn one's knowledge, beliefs, and world outlook. A black swan event's power can be devastating, but does it really warrant the importance we ascribe to it? Taleb says there are three elements to the black swan event. First, it's a big surprise. The happening or event in question must be completely unforeseeable. There can be no way the observer could have seen it coming in advance. Second, it has a major effect. The black swan event must have some sort of fateful or immense outcome, whether it's physical, structural, or emotional. And third, people attempt to rationalize it after it happens. After the black swan event takes place for the first time, people affected by it might root around for signs they missed or try to explain in retrospect how people should have expected that the event to happen in the first place. Now, that third element is where one runs into trouble. A black swan event can be all-encompassing, indeed traumatic, that it could force a wholesale reformation of one's belief or personal policies. But a black swan event is still an outlier, especially when it's a random bolt from the blue that couldn't have possibly been accounted for. To ascribe too much importance to a black swan event, to let it account for wide sweeping changes that weren't there when it happened, is at heart nonsensical. This mental model is about looking past the gravity of a black swan event, zooming out and seeing the whole picture. Don't let the possibility of more lightning make you move to the desert. Catering to black swan events will come at the detriment of everything else in your belief systems as well as large opportunity costs. When you are faced with big events, business or personal, be it professional or personal, allow room to consider that it may very well be a black swan event that, while important, is not very informative or indicative of anything at all. Don't organize your entire strategy and energy around the likelihood of a black swan events unless you work for the federal emergency management system that requires to overly analyze, critically look, and do the risk assessment all the time. Disasters are not going to be an everyday part of your personal existence. Let yourself think about worst case scenarios, but then bring yourself back to reality. Is this event really likely to occur again? How much of an outlier was it? Can we reasonably even do anything about it? Should it change the way we act if it is inevitable from time to time? If lightning will strike a few times in a decade, is it worth retrofitting your entire operation and home to account for that? In other words, should you stop driving cars because you heard an acquaintance got into an accident? Smart planning will always seek to understand risk factors, but it must also accurately analyze them. Life is full of risks. We take them every day when we cross the road. But life must go on. You shouldn't live your life in fear of a black swan event. But you can and should simply put a few moments of consideration into how they might happen and what they might require you to do. If we zoom out a bit on black swan events, you will realize that we are trying to find a predictable pattern in what is actually a random set of events. This is known as the gambler's fallacy, named for sentiments such as rolling a pair of dice and feeling that you must eventually roll a 7 because it has been a while or just you are due. Never mind the fact that this is not statistically or probabilistically sound. You are attempting to create order in something impossible to have control over. The gambler's fallacy is the notion that just because X happened, Y should happen. X shouldn't happen, or X should have happened again. More often than not, these events are all independent of each other. And this should guide your decision making to be less biased. The gambler's fallacy is representative of a broader phenomena known as apophenia, which is the human tendencies to see patterns and connections through random data points, usually also coinciding with too few data points. This is why people see rabbits and clouds and elaborate scenes from random things. Do not do that.
And that's it for today's video. I hope this was informative for you. I'm sure many of you might already be aware of the Black Swan Theory. And for people who have learned it for the first time, I hope this was informative and insightful for you. As the theory suggests, that it's really important for us to understand when to zoom out when it comes to managing oneself. Not everything that happens to people around us would also happen to us, and it might also happen once or twice in a lifetime. So it is extremely important to understand that we do not need to overly analyze things that is happening around us and become critical of the events around us. Just take life as it comes, and I hope this was insightful for you when it comes to managing your own self. So stay tuned for many more such interesting concepts, theories, articles, stories, and case studies related to management. I'll see you next week.